Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Destination Truth. Today, as usual, I have a rather sinister and depressing topic to talk about. Not as bad as Pizzagate though, so bear with me. Today I want to talk about the real history of the United States. The most honest and clear truth about the recent history of the United States and more importantly the deep state. Now, I cannot tell you, and I do not know yet basically who exactly started perpetuating the deep state, but basically I can guarantee it'll always relate back to international globalist bankers. However, the names elude me at this moment, and at this moment in time, it's mostly unimportant. However, this video is mostly going to talk about the disgusting, utterly reprehensible past of the CIA and the United States involvement internationally. And where did I get this information before I go into it? I want to share a list of books that I've been reading, and I would also like to ask you guys, I'm becoming slowly but surely, I'm becoming more and more of somewhat of I don't know, maybe this is a little bit too overbearing sounding, but I'd call myself somewhat of a scholar of history at this point. And there's nothing really else I can say. I've researched medieval history and more recent history. Not much in between and going farther back. So I'm not an expert of, ancient world history, but I know some things if they relate to the medieval times or the creation of the Bavarian Illuminati or modern day society. Anyways, diving into what kind of material I've been reading, I'd like to share with you. Okay, so first off, I'm going to share a whole list of books with you in the order that I think they should be read. I didn't necessarily read them in this order, but I think they should be read in this order because it'll basically help you go in a more linear fashion, and things will relate, and it'll help you remember things because similar topics will be discussed in a good fashion, basically. So starting off with, I'm going to share basically 5 important books you should read, and then another 2 extra ones that might be interesting for you. So starting it off, None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen and Larry Abraham. This book is the first book you should read. It is short, it is concise, and it will drive the point straight home, okay? The next book you should read, which will really help you solidify your new understanding of the world, is The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Now that one is 4 times as thorough as None Dare Call It Conspiracy, with much more information. I mean, it's 4 times as long, and it's better. It's actually a better book, but None Dare Call It Conspiracy is a very good book for you to help red pill yourself as to how this world you live in actually works. Now, before I go any further, I just want to reiterate something I've said before, which is the world you live in is profoundly complex, and it is far more nuanced and sinister than you can possibly imagine if you don't already consider yourself red-pilled. If you are red-pilled, you already know that the world you live in is kind of a demonic, sad, shady place, and a lot of bad things are going on all around us. And if you live in the United States, you really don't have a clue because mostly propaganda and a overwhelming amount of good entertainment, the same way the Romans were entertained to keep them distracted from things that do matter, in fact. So, moving on from my books, the third book I want you to read is called Population Control by Jim Marrs. It was relatively short, actually, pretty easy read. I liked it a lot, and it does discuss some of the things that are mentioned previously, as well as topics like the one I just mentioned, which is the simple fact that you are intentionally entertained to death in this country. They make it intentional that there are 1,000 million different things you could be doing than red pilling yourself on the reality of the world you live in. Why does it matter? Now, nothing, the rest of this video doesn't even matter if you don't understand why this matters. Why what you're watching right now, it actually really matters. Especially if you feel like you lack a purpose in life. If you do not have a goal, some kind of zeal, some kind of mission in life, this is it. It's calling you right now. And I'm just one agent of it. And the mission is, well, that's actually more complicated than you think. And you can bring God into it if you like, but you don't have to. You could be completely secular and understand that what the world, and namely the United States government, is doing in the shadows is profoundly evil and unacceptable, and it has to stop. And it starts with red pilling yourself, and then becoming a libertarian, and then becoming active and realizing that the world around you is asleep. They're living quite literally in the Matrix. And the movie series, The Matrix by the Wachowski brothers, was the perfect analogy. It is a great, great analogy, and trust me when I say it, they understood some of the things I talk about. They actually do. And part of the reason they made The Matrix was, in fact, to red pill people and help them understand that much of the world around us is largely an illusion. It is there to keep you in a rat race of life, keep your head down, and basically be a tax slave to the government. You are being harnessed for your labor throughout life. And whatever you do in life, if you are not red-pilled, I can guarantee you will be inconsequential. Look around you. How many adult males, and I don't mention females here because females are in a worse bucket where they're even less red-pilled by and large and do even more meaningless things in the long run, by and large. Now this is just averages, but look at your average adult male in America. How many of them basically work some kind of a job, whether it's a dead-end job or not, doesn't matter. Just work a job, whether it's really lucrative or not, doesn't matter. What matters is they work a job and they come home and they watch football. They watch entertainment. They waste their days just basically mingling with their family and watching entertainment all day. Unfortunately, we have let the deep state go so far that it is going to take certain people like you and I to stop that trend and say, no, I'm going to sacrifice potentially years of my life, potentially my life, to red pilling the people in this country, most importantly, to the evils of the United States of America, and try to bring a stop to the evils that it is wrecking on millions and millions of people worldwide. Now, you might not know what nation building is right now, but let me summarize. Nation building is when basically you have an ethnocentric government like our own that says we know how to do things, we know how it's done, and we have the best way. And we're gonna take the effort to tell the rest of the world how it should be done because they're clearly not doing it right. We are. Now, I'm not getting into the meat of it just yet, but I will. This is just the intro. Sorry, this is going to be a long video, guys, but let me just go ahead and finish the fourth and fifth book. Fourth one, Operation Gladio. This entire rest of the video is going to be about that book because that's the book I'm on right now, and I'm almost done with it. And man, am I red-pilled, and man, I'm, you know, if you consider yourself red-pilled, you might have read one of these books, but if you haven't read all of them, and especially Operation Gladio, you do not know the details that will give you the passion needed to be active and to want to bring change. Okay, Operation Gladio is by Paul L. Williams, and man, the caveat to that book is that man really, really did not want to get red-pilled the way he had been, and you know, he basically learned that his church he had committed his life to was in fact the great and abominable church, and was in fact doing all kinds of evil worldwide. We'll get more into that in a minute. Last one of the 5 is The CIA as Organized Crime by Douglas Valentine. I haven't gotten very far in that book. In fact, I've only read chapter 1, but that one's the next one. I've got to finish one at a time. So let me finish up by adding an extra 2 that I think you should see or read, but if you don't really need to, because the information you can find a number of different ways, but there's Room 40, British Naval Intelligence, 1914 to 1918. By Patrick Beasley. It's all about basically World War I, and if you haven't red-pilled yourself on how false flags attacks are done, it is perhaps the best book to read all about how we created the false flag attack of the Lusitania. And the Lusitania was the boat where, you know, it seems to always be boats, but throughout history, almost every false flag attack, there's been some boat that had American people on it and it sank or was destroyed or had casualties on board. So, you know, whether it was remember the Maine, remember the Lusitania, remember Pearl Harbor, remember the Gulf of Tonkin attack, or 9/11, any of them. I mean, almost all of those were boats, right? They were. Anyways, great book. Worth a read if you can find a copy. The other one is Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, who worked for the Mercury News down here in San Jose. I live in the Bay Area, so I mentioned it like that. But I've already made a video on this one, guys. You don't really need to read that book. I recommend just watching the movie. There was actually a movie that was able to get produced without the deep state shutting it down. It's called Kill the Messenger. Great movie. Watch it, or watch my video on it, and you'll get some of those details. Anyways, that one's all about how we've already verified. We have the facts that the CIA was running all kinds of drug smuggling campaigns out of South America and bringing drugs into America, namely through Clinton-run Arkansas, particularly Mina Air Force Base. That's a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down, and I'd love to go there with you, but limited time because I gotta feed myself and stuff. Anyway, okay guys, so I've mentioned those books that I really want you to read, and if you read them, it'll change your life. I'm not kidding. It will change your life. If you want drive in life, if you want a purpose in life and you feel you don't have one, I urge you, read these books and join me. I'm trying to make a close-knit group of people that know the truth and talk about the truth and share the truth and are willing to work with me, you know, pro bono, but basically work together to red pill the rest of the country and to bring a new form of more righteous government to the world. Okay? Okay, guys, that's that. Now I want to get into the meat, the thick, dark, evil, disgusting meat of the CIA, and namely the Vatican. The Catholic Church. So Operation Gladio, fascinating book. It's written by a guy who had been part of the clergy his entire life, basically, and at some point basically became, he was a writer, and he was to basically get rid of certain historical facts about the church, and so he was allowed to actually look at significant amounts of detailed history and actions that the church had made. Unfortunately, he was ideologically driven not to do so because he was actually a good Catholic, as strange as that might sound. And so he refused to do so, and the church had let him research all of these documents and surprisingly didn't kill him. I thought they might have, honestly, because he was able to get a lot of information, and this book is all about everything that happened. Operation Gladio itself, the operation was basically, the US realized that when we had just about defeated the Nazis in Germany, realized that we had spent all this effort defeating one fascist enemy, but the far worse enemy was in fact communism. It would be more acceptable to have a fascist regime in one country if they weren't invading the rest of their continent than having a communist adversary that was willing to try to actually change the world, the whole world, ideologically to accept communism. Now, I've already talked about this before, but communism is not a move of the masses. It is a move of the 0.00001%. About 80 people in the world will end up owning everything on the planet if communism was actually established, because at the end of the day, everyone takes orders from someone, and that's basically the way of the world when it comes to actual ownership of certain things. I can't articulate it nearly as well as someone like Gary Allen or G. Edward Griffin, so please read those two first books I mentioned if you want to learn more about that. Nonetheless, so Operation Gladio, they realized that they had defeated the Nazis, but now communists have a foothold on this planet, and we don't have a good ideological purpose or reason to go to war with them. And so America, one thing we've always done consistently is need false flag attacks in one way or another to justify our actions. Now, we've been bullying Russia for a long time, but during the Cold War, it was much more adversarial because the nuclear threat and the use of nuclear weapons was much more on the table. So basically, the world was kind of constantly in crisis. The FBI and CIA were doing all kinds of things, and the CIA could not fund what they needed to do to stop communism. So Operation Gladio was literally taking leftover World War II Nazis, as well as other members of Italy and other European countries that have been trained in the war or had some kind of training in military, some kind of military training, and basically turning them into werewolves was the name used for some time. I think it was later changed to gray wolves, but werewolves was the word the Nazis used, which were basically secret sleeper cell military units that would basically use guerrilla tactics to make it extremely difficult, expensive, and dangerous for communist Russians to continue living and occupying countries like Germany and Poland and the Czech Republic and such. So these leave-behind units were actually at one point all trained in an island off of Italy, and some of this was funded and most of the money routed through the Vatican Bank. And basically, we learn all kinds of crazy, interesting things, such as the current Pope, John Paul, was in fact the only Pope that's actually been accused of crimes against humanity, because in Argentina, where he's from, he in fact helped the Nazis, real Nazis from Germany, real, not neo-Nazis, real Nazis, basically get away with some form of a legitimate genocide of Jews in Argentina. Now, this is the top secret, non-disclosed second Holocaust. Now, if you've watched my extra controversial video on the Holocaust and how facts have been basically grossly neglected and basically destroyed about what happened in the Holocaust, and I'm not denying it happened, but in fact, certain actions did not take place the way people have said they have happened, and the numbers also are very off. And I'm willing to stand to that because I've done the research. And sorry guys, this is getting lengthy, but I'm just gonna say right now, you know, I've wasted hours of my life engaging in some of these fights on Facebook with liberals, and I'm already of the age that some of my peers literally just call me some crazy conspiracy theorist because they have not done any research. So the mainstream news says one thing and I say another, and they're like, you have no facts. And it's like, you haven't spent the time to research them. They're all here. Like, you know, and it's just so much work. It's a full-time job to be able to red pill people. So it's very difficult for people to listen to what I'm saying and actually understand what it means per se. So, anyway guys, carrying on with Operation Gladio, yes, the current Pope is potentially evil. Inside the book, we also learn of a potential assassination of the Pope before him to install a Pope that is going to do what is necessary. The last Pope was disgruntled about the reality of what the church had been doing in relation to the CIA to fund black ops in fighting communism internationally. So the funding for this did not come entirely and mostly did not come from American taxpayers, which is amazing to hear, by the way. But guess what? The CIA wasn't willing to not do their job because they didn't have money. Instead, they're willing to take the forbidden fruit and become straight up evil to take care of that. So this is their justification for basically becoming the #1 world's largest drug distributor in the world. The CIA. The CIA has been organizing fields for growing poppy, for heroin, as well as other drugs. Not marijuana. Marijuana is not profitable enough for them, but the growing of heroin, namely, and cocaine in South America, Southeast Asia, and now the Middle East. Now, if you're wondering why we're still in countries like Afghanistan and such, it is to protect our assets, which are in fact poppy fields. Yes, so if you let that sink in, you will understand that the reality of 9/11 and our war in the Middle East and many terrorist organizations are in fact to fund secret wars and to fund America ruling the world. That's what it's funding. It's funding ruling the world. Sorry guys, my lighting is terrible, I think, so I'm gonna turn this a little bit and see if you guys like it a little bit better like this. But anyway, so America does quite literally rule the world, and we're able to fund it through selling drugs to basically populations that the rulers in charge deem as second rate. And so you will learn that the people in charge of this country during the 1900 through to today, namely, are actual racists, which are why Democrats have surprisingly been largely in control of the government, but Republicans too, don't get me wrong. They're the same party. It's called the War Party, and they're all the same except on things that blue pill people that are asleep think are the most important things in the world, like health care and abortion, whether a woman has control over her body, or whether women can even vote, stuff like that, where it's like, yes, it's all important, but as soon as you start letting people that don't own land or people that aren't of age 25 that have a fully developed brain and have actually lived a little bit, like once you start letting these people vote, you let the beast of democracy out, which is the fact that, I mentioned the French historian and philosopher, not Voltaire, I'm forgetting, I'm terrible with names, guys, but I'll link it in the show notes below. But he once said that when America realizes that they can bribe their voters with taxpayer money to vote a certain way, it is not just the end of democracy, it is the end of the country. Because it is in fact now ruled by someone else, not the people. It's not a true democracy. So that's where we are now. We do not live in a democracy, people. We live in a time where the welfare state is basically allowing Democrats and the War Party to get away with international war crimes left and right, because as long as we're the victors, we will be seen as the good guys. So anyway, I'm trying to think here. I think I've summarized everything I wanted to in regards to Operation Gladio. Now I just want to summarize and say that Operation Gladio also is responsible for creating Operation Cyclone, which is perhaps the most disgusting, terrible, horrible thing I have ever learned. And what you learn about Operation Cyclone is that the US government did in fact basically not just fund, but literally arm all of these terrorist groups that we've heard of, like the Taliban or the Haqqani network or Al-Qaeda or ISIS or a number of other groups like Tariq-e-Nafaz. I don't know how to pronounce this stuff, sorry. But anyways, if you look into it, like the US government is actually like directly basically doing coups internationally to end democracy and liberal movements to succeed in the Middle East, because liberals are actually against, by and large, they're against things like growing poppy and such. So instead, they put radical war chiefs in charge to destabilize the area and make those people extremely wealthy, because it's really easy to control psychopaths. Psychopaths that need money to fund an army, as well as whatever bad habits they have, like being addicted to women and drugs or whatever. It's really easy. If they're psychopathic enough, they'll do anything. So the CIA has literally funded numerous very violent, evil rapists throughout history in order to secure poppy, to make heroin, to take that heroin into this country and give it namely to black people, to ruin their community, their lives, and then fund top secret wars internationally to control the world, if you will. We've done numerous political coups of entire governments in South America. There's actually, in fact, once a political doctrine that basically said that if America cannot control its continent, which includes South America, if it cannot control that, how could it possibly control the rest of the world? So I don't know what point in history America went off the deep end and decided to become world police and quite literally the rulers of the world. But yeah, guys, we're, in my opinion, we're basically like a vanilla type of a Nazi regime that have taken charge. So I'm not calling anyone in this country a Nazi that's actually just an individual on the streets, especially libertarians and people that are actually red-pilled. People even like Richard Spencer, like, he's not a Nazi. He understands that geopolitical and basically population movements and developments in time are leading probably to some kind of a genocide of white people in this country and internationally as well, potentially. But what we do know for sure, aside from conspiracy theories like that, which is a conspiracy theory that's somewhat unfounded at this moment, but it is probable. It is probable, but what we do know is that there's going to be a massive depopulation of the world in the next 20 to 30 years, in my opinion, and I think it's much closer than that. I think the next financial recession will be so impactful that it will trigger some kind of massive civil wars, a number of things that I honestly cannot predict. But there is planning going on, and it's been planned for decades. So in closing, let me say this: there's two kinds of people left in this world, and you can call them red-pilled or blue-pilled, but I will say this: they're more like this: people that see history as just a random chain of events, or people who see history as it really is, which is namely a series of highly organized events planned by insiders and cabals and cartels and groups of people in secret societies, like the Masons, for example. Anyways, guys, the book Operation Gladio is absolutely fascinating. I encourage you to read it. And if I've said anything that has been interesting for you, please like and subscribe my channel. It is dying. It needs your help. I need your help, and I want to help you red pill yourself and red pill others. This is a passion project. I have not been given a cent to this date, even though I've been asking for donations via cryptocurrencies and a Patreon. I haven't gotten a cent, guys, so this is a passion project, and I cannot ask you enough if you'd be willing to help me somehow, because at the end of the day, most of my time is still being spent just feeding myself and soon my wife. I'm engaged. So yeah, it means a lot that you're even watching this video, and if you are, then my hat off to you, and I wish you all the best. And please like and subscribe, because I only want to bring you really interesting topics, really things that you should really be wrapping your heads around. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Have a good one.